Welcome to the nextTalk podcast. We are a nonprofit passionate about keeping kids safe online. We're learning together how to navigate tech, culture, and faith with our kids. Today we are joined by Jamie Mershon. She is an amazing licensed professional counselor. She's partnered with us for years. I mean, I've sent so many kids and families to you. And she is on our advisory council. Thankfully, I can text her when I have immediate, like, oh my gosh, this is happening. I need some help here. Yeah, I need some help and direction. But Jamie's been great. If you haven't listened to some of her previous shows, like we'll link them, especially the eating disorder, because we're going to get into that today. And we did a previous show about that. But before we get into the topic at hand, why don't you tell us just about you?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I'm always honored to be here. And a little bit about me is my journey started as an elementary school teacher. I taught first and third grade, and then God transitioned me into the school counseling world. And that was just a really incredible time in my life. And then when I got married and started having babies, God took me out of that and put me in private practice. And he has just blown my mind of how he has grown my practice. And I have just been in the throes of it while building this practice of marriage and motherhood and all the things. And so it's really cool though, to just, look back and see all the different phases and how God got me here today. And yeah.
And you have 3 kids.
Yes. 3 daughters. And so we were overachievers and decided we were going to have 3 kids in 3.5 years, or God decided that, I should say. And so if you want somebody that's like humble and relatable and just, gets the crazy and messiness of life, I'm your gal.
Yeah. And those kids are young. I mean, your oldest is late elementary school.
Exactly.
That's the oldest.
That's the oldest.
So you're the
4,
Uber.
second kinder. Yeah, I am the Uber. No one's driving.
You're the school parties.
Yes.
You're it.
Yes. And we're at the kid house. And so, yeah.
You're in the thick of it.
Yes.
I love how God uses Jamie's experience as a mom, as a parent, and merges it with her training and her expertise as a counselor. And I think it's a very invaluable thing. And so every time I'm with her, I'm like, okay, that was a counseling session. What you just said that.
You are so sweet, Mandy. Well, as you know, I just take so much comfort into the scripture, Philippians 1:6, right? And so how the Lord uses the couch, and even in my own life, I love that scripture because he started a good work in us, and until our last breath and we are home with Christ, we are not called to perfection. We are called to growth. And there's a lot of peace in that. So that is always my goal of how the Lord uses the couch. It represents growth, how that scripture relates to my life. I'm not called to be the perfect mom or the perfect counselor. And I'm not going to say everything perfect today, right? But we're growing and we're learning. And that just is so comforting to my heart.
Yeah, that's such a great scripture. Such a great scripture. And it's also like the tone of humility that we want to be with our kids, like apologizing to our kids, saying when we're wrong, understanding that we're not always going to get it right.
Yeah. And I often say that. I'm like, hey, we're a Philippians 1:6 family.
Yeah.
Right? Like that doesn't just apply to kids are learning and growing. That's me. Like I get it wrong so many times. And yeah.
I love that. I mean, I know we posted something incorrect. We've said something on the podcast that didn't land the way I thought it would. And I'm like, oh, that's not what we meant. But I understand how those people took it that way.
Absolutely.
And so we're all the work in progress, which leads me to, we want to talk about body image and eating disorders. But really what led to this show today was I saw a post by a big account we follow. We recommend them all the time. And they're really focused on talking to young kids about sex. And they just have some really great practical one-liners, that they just throw at people. Mm-hmm. That's great. And I love it. But they had a post recently that I was like, oh, I don't know about that.
It got your attention.
And it wasn't that I was mad at them or upset or anything. I was just like, oh, from the work that I've done over the last decade and learning from you about like eating disorders, it was just like, whoa, what if we have a kid struggling with this? And so first of all, I want to read the post to you.
Got it.
And then I want you to like give your hot take immediately. And then let's dive into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the post. It says how to talk to your child about their body. Step 1, don't. Don't say anything if she's lost weight. Don't say anything if he's gained weight. If you think your daughter's body looks amazing, don't say that. Don't talk about your body. Don't talk about your diet. Don't talk about how many carbs you've had or how you wish you could eat those French fries but can't. And then it goes on and on. Mm-hmm. When I first saw it, I thought, oh, they do such good work. And I followed them for so long. Probably the heart behind that was we grew up in a toxic environment about body image.
Yeah.
And they're trying to correct that.
Correct.
Because we did. We grew up commenting on people's weight and all this stuff. And it's like, whoa, we need to fix that. But what's your hot take? Like, what do you immediately think of when I read that post?
Well, I think, we're all healing and growing and recovering, right? Just from maybe, when I say recovering, maybe just from the lies or things that in the past, it's like, oh, that could have been done better. And what I notice is when people start healing, getting restored, recovering, or even grasping healthier concepts, right? There's a level of a pendulum and it's swinging. And so we kind of go extreme. So maybe it was the extreme of like, there was so much focus on it. And now we're at the other extreme where that is saying, don't talk about it at all. I think that's extreme too, right? But if you think about a cord just going side to side or a string, eventually it's going to land in the middle. Mm-hmm. It's going to calibrate. And I think as we're diving into these topics, everyone is going to find themselves somewhere in this pendulum. And we want to find ourselves in the middle where it's healthy and it's balanced. So stay out of the extremes. Because basically when they say just don't talk about it at all, that's extreme. And then uber focused, that's an extreme. So I think it's not all bad, not all good. We just have to find a healthier place to land because these kids do want to talk about it. Because something that I've always said, we run off of beliefs more than we run off of reality. And kids are creating beliefs about their body. They're creating relationships with their body. And they do want our input and they do want us to help them navigate their changing bodies and help them establish good, positive, habits.
I think that's the key for me. I think that's why it rubbed me so wrong. It really did.
Yeah.
Because I was like, okay, first of all, no topic is off limits.
Yeah.
And my mind went to, if you have a kid who you see significant weight gain or significant weight loss, like that's a conversation. It's not shaming.
Absolutely.
Of course. We don't want anybody to be like, oh my gosh, you've gained 50 pounds. What is up with you?
Yes.
We're not, of course, don't say that. But like, we have to notice what's going on in our kids' minds and in their narrative, right?
Right.
Like that's important to be able to connect with them.
Right. Exactly. And just being in tune, because if you have a kid that's saying like, oh, I'm so hungry, and you make their favorite meal and they're not eating it. Okay. What's that about? You hear them, they're hungry. They have food that they like and they're not eating. Red flag. But that's being in tune. And so even just saying, hey, honey, like, I've noticed you're saying you're really hungry. I cooked your favorite meal. Can you help me understand? Because that could be a red flag to an eating disorder, right? If a child who's always saying I'm hungry or, oh, I'll eat later and they never eat later, or they're chewing lots of gum, drinking lots of water, right? So a lot of this is this attunement too, because what that post is saying, just don't bring it up at all. Well, by not bringing it up, we could really be ignoring outcries or ignoring this child who is in the throes of something really dangerous.
Well, and there was, I commented and I was trying to be very kind. I wasn't trying to call them out at all.
Sure.
I mean, we have people comment on our posts and call us out and we miss stuff. Well, we miss angles or just thought processes.
It's not conflict. It's just a conversation because they posted that probably well-meaning. And if we sat, they'd probably have a different angle on it, right? But because we're not privy to that angle, we're just privy to what they put. That sounds extreme.
Well, and what I was afraid is that parents would internalize it because I've seen this before with some of the things I've said.
Yeah.
That I will make a blanket statement trying to overcorrect how we grew up.
Yes.
And then it's like parents get the vibe of, well, we can't ever do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, that's not really what I mean, like I meant there's a middle ground. There's a balance with all of it.
Yes.
And so my fear literally was that parents would read that. And if they had a kid with extreme weight loss, they wouldn't seek help.
Right.
Or they would just sweep it under the rug. which is one of the things that at nextTalk, like, it's just a no-no for us. Like, we're not sweeping anything under the rug. We're bringing in things into the light.
Amen.
But I totally agree that we have to do it in a healthy, very healthy way.
Yeah.
So as we were talking through this, one of the things you said, and I think this is really important, because looking back all over the years, you know, I have a girl and a boy. And I think sometimes, like, I would really not bring up body stuff unless they started.
Sure.
And I would see them to start to develop thoughts about their body.
Yeah.
My daughter and I tackled this on a previous show. I mean, she's really long legs. My husband's 6'4". You know,
I get that.
Everybody
My
husband's tall but me.
We are going to have some tall girls. Yes,
Everybody's
I get that.
tall but me. And she just was getting so frustrated about how skirts fit on her and clothing. And like, it was her problem. Like, she's the problem. And I remember just saying, babe, like, your legs are beautiful. Like, I know it feels like you're the problem, but it's really the clothing that's the problem.
Exactly.
It's really like...
Well, you corrected the narrative. You gave her a different way to look at it, right?
Yes. But I think that if I had bought into the... Don't comment, because what if I say something wrong to steer... Then she would have kept believing the narrative that her body was the problem.
Yeah. And, you know, when I hear you say that, something that I think of in the counseling world is, you know, we do a lot of work with the brain. And earlier I said we run off of beliefs more than we run off of reality. And so this visual I'll use a lot is like, imagine just a pasture with like tall grass, right? And here's the barn and there's the water. And if a horse goes from barn to water like one time, the grass is going to pop down and pop right back up, right? Mm-hmm. But imagine like months and years of this horse in this pasture going from barn to water, water to barn to water, back and forth, right? Like, it's going to create a path. It is no longer just grass popping up and down. It is a deep-rooted path. And that's how God's designed our brain, is that we have neural pathways. And when we run off of those beliefs and we practice those beliefs, whether they're true or untrue, they're going to feel like reality. So we're creating these neural pathways, right? And a big one is we have to make sure that we're understanding the relationship our children have with their body. So if the story, if the narrative, if the belief is, you know, I was created, you know, with long legs and the clothing industry, you know, is not favorable to my body, but I can run and I love my hair, or what, like, you know what I'm saying though? Like, what is their conversation with themselves, right? Or is the conversation, you know, I hate these long legs. Like, I wish I looked more like Sarah. You know, I'm disgusted when I look in the mirror. Like, years of that, right? That's a really negative relationship. That's why it's helpful to have these conversations, because you kind of get to understand what the relationship is with your child and their body. And sometimes we have to put the horse in a new pasture, and it's like, okay, let's create a new neural pathway. What's the truer story, or what's the correct story? Just like with your daughter, right? Now the legs aren't the problem. The clothing is the problem.
Right.
And now you can focus on solutions that, okay, maybe we just need to add extra fabric or find different stores that are meant for tall people or a certain brand. And so now you don't feel helpless. You shift it to, okay, I'm just learning more about my body, my style, and what works for my body type.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we did. But it became about not her.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, because if I had just felt like, well, we can't ever talk about your body or what you're struggling with or whatever, then because I'm going to say something wrong or shameful that obviously I don't want to do.
Right.
I don't want to make that mistake. And if I do, apologize, obviously, and own it. But I think that I would have missed all of those conversations to redirect. Like you said, put the horse in a new pasture.
Yeah.
Because that path was forming, that my body's the problem.
Yeah.
And her body's not the problem. Her body's amazing. And so when I saw in that post, don't tell your body it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, not just randomly out of the blue, don't focus on the body, but in context, it is really important to tell your kid how amazing they are.
Absolutely.
And to highlight how they may be different from others.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, just, you know, one thing, you know, having 3 girls, or, you know, praying over them, like, I love how God designed you. Like, I love your eyes. I love your hair. You know, when we think about body, we often think of just weight. It's really creating a relationship with yourself. lately my little 9-year-old, she's almost 10. She's really been into skincare. And I love that, right? Because she gets to connect with her gender of just, of getting all dolled up or taking care of herself, all that fun stuff that we as girls like to do. Skincare, feeling pretty, but one of the things that I pointed out is I love how you steward your body. You are so good at, taking the time and cleaning your skin. You're really good about washing your hair and combing it and braiding it. I just love how you take such great care of your body, because if you think about a treasure, right, you're going to protect it. You're going to take care of it. And her body is her treasure, right? Mm-hmm. And she's being a good steward of it. Yeah. And so there's so many ways we can take care of our body other than our weight. And I just call them habits, right? Like, you have so many great habits, and sometimes if I, hear kids talk about like, I don't like how I feel in my body, well, tell me all the really good habits you think that you do. They're like, well, I drink a lot of water and, I'm really good about getting enough sleep. Great. Let's keep doing those things. What's something that we could add to your habits, And sometimes they say, well, I could move more. Great. Like, add that to the list, right? It doesn't have to be this like huge focus and catastrophize it, right? It's just a conversation.
When you said in the very beginning of all those examples, you said when we think about body, we automatically go to weights. And I think that is the problem, because we've all been raised in that generation where we have some scars from that. Yeah. And I think that was really what we're talking about here, because it's way more than just weights. Yeah. Our body, we're way more than what we weigh, what size we are.
I think that's the lie, though, is our worth is connected either to performance or our worth is connected to weight. That can also often be the lie, right? Our achievements and how we look, because that's all outward.
Yeah.
Right? What do you have to offer?
Right.
And so I think it's really important that we understand, there's so many parts to it other than just a weight.
So, okay. So as a counselor, you see kids with eating disorders, you treat them.
Yeah.
Say we have a parent at home and they haven't noticed extreme weight loss or weight gain.
Yeah.
And the kid is not sharing it with the parents.
Yep.
Okay. So we don't have it in to start talking about it. So it is kind of awkward to just bring it up.
Sure.
What is your best piece of advice for parents in that situation?
Obviously the goal is always to be in tune with our children, right? And there's a level of studying them. Like kind of what I said earlier, like they're saying they're hungry and they're not eating. It could just be as simple as, help me understand. Hey, I've just noticed you've been saying you're hungry a lot. And I'm making dinner, but you're not eating. Can you help me understand what's going on with that? Right? Because sometimes they don't know how to advocate. They really want somebody to notice I'm not well. So it's this like 1 foot in the dark and 1 foot, please help me.
Yeah.
Right? Because normally it starts with both feet in the dark. And then it starts getting to this place where it's kind of scary. Right? Where they're like, oh, this is getting a slippery slope. It's really just kind of not, because oftentimes we may, come across as accusatory. I think help me understand is just a really good keep the walls down, right? Like where somebody doesn't get defensive or, hey, I'm confused about this, right? You're seeking understanding. You're not accusing or anything. Or, you know what? I have been noticing, you're eating in your room more, and you're not out here with the family, is something going on or has something shifted, And so that tells that child like, oh, my mom's noticing. She sees me. She can tell that something's off. And so I think oftentimes we do have to push in, but we have to do it in a way that doesn't create that child to be defensive or feel like we're coming after them or that they're in trouble.
Yeah.
But we also have to be willing to go to that hard place too if they're pretty dug in and they're like, I'm fine. Nothing's wrong. We have to be ready to, have those hard conversations of, you know what? I've actually been outside the bathroom door and I've been hearing you throw up, or I've been noticing you stuffing food in napkins. Like there comes to a place where we just have to call it what it is because that's loving.
I love this because, in the comments, of course I chimed in with what about eating disorders and all of that. But what was really amazing was people were sharing their stories, their vulnerable stories. And, one person chimed in, I didn't know who she was, but she said, I'm glad you said this because I suffered with an eating disorder and nobody spoke up for me.
Yeah.
And it was almost like I don't want to speak for her, but what I interpreted that was like, she didn't feel seen and she was struggling and nobody advocated for her.
Right. Exactly.
And I think that's where we have to be super careful telling parents, like, don't talk about that or don't do that because we do internalize that and think it's off limits somehow. Even if it's in a general context of our parents screwed this up, we have to be very careful with this topic.
And eating disorders look different, right? Like anorexia and bulimia used to be the go-tos, right? Now it's orthorexia where kids are getting praised. It's extreme clean eating. I only eat organic. I only eat salads, right? And so you see them eating. And so
that's, people don't think of that as an eating disorder.
Right, exactly.
So dive into that a little bit more for me. Because sometimes we're like, oh, that's a healthy habit.
Right.
But when does it become extreme?
Right. And I think it's just, when it becomes very restrictive, right? Like obviously there's more medical things going on like gluten and celiac, like there's more awareness around that stuff. So some people truly like that is medically how they need to have their diet, right? But then there's the other extreme too, where it's extreme eating. Like, I'm not going to eat the cake or I won't eat anything if it's not organic or, I'm really good about just eating this protein. There's so many different diets out there too. And so for growing kids, like I do think there is a fine line of there's just education. I think there's just education to how you need to educate your kids. Like there's not good foods and bad foods, right? Too much of anything is not good, right? And so kind of teaching kids to be in tune with their body, right? We eat when we're hungry, we stop when we're full because, another eating disorder is just binge eating where kids are overeating. And we've seen the pendulum swing on the other where like all bodies are acceptable, which for somebody who has struggled with weight, like, yeah, I am glad that sizes look different than they did when I was a kid. Because I remember having to shop like in the guys section sometimes. It is still one of those things where I think that we have to educate our children on what healthy habits look like and what a healthy relationship looks like with food. So sometimes it starts with us because we don't have a good relationship with our body and our food habits. And other times it comes to, we're so scared that we're like, well, but if I say this, are they going to think I'm shaming them? And so I think it's just really being mindful and discerning on how to have those conversations, but just in general. So if you have one kid who's really struggling, we're going to maybe just change what family dinners look like. We're not going to focus on that just one child. It's like, hey guys, like I tried this new recipe, or we're going to start family walks or whatever it looks like. There's just ways that we can just incorporate healthy habits to maybe not single one person out, but just as a family, like, yeah, we should be more mindful or have conversations.
Well, and I think too, we see a lot in this generation, like they're just rotting on their phones all the time.
Exactly.
And so, a lot of the unhealthy stuff sometimes is just about moving, and it's not really anything to do with your body. This is about your mind too.
Right.
And, and having those, and like if you're up rotting, scrolling on your phone all night, you're probably not going to be at your healthiest, mentally, physically, anything.
Exactly.
And so attack it. So from the screen habit side too.
Logical, right? This isn't like emotional. This isn't attackful. Like take all emotions out of it, right? What kid do you think is going to feel better? One that went to bed at a decent time, that, not even comparison, but just look at it logically, right? Like a child who's up till 2 a.m. on a screen and they've been on the screen since they got out of school. Like obviously that child is not going to feel his best compared to a child who, played outside for a bit, did their homework, ate dinner, had appropriate screen time, bed at a different time. There's just a better way sometimes. And it doesn't have to be personal. There is just a better way sometimes.
Just going back to what you said about the eating disorder. What did you call it?
Orthorexia.
Orthorexia.
Yeah.
So that is like healthy eating, total.
Yes.
I think
and working out is connected to that too. So you're working out, it's just ultra healthy, but again, it's that extreme.
And I think that is such a good point there because it's good. That's good that you're doing that.
Right. And you're getting praised on self-control and you're getting praised on those habits and
discipline.
My word, you look great. You're disciplined. Yes.
You're disciplined. But it can come to a point where you spend more time counting calories and looking at labels than you do living your life.
Correct.
And that's when it gets kind of off balance.
And I think what we have to be careful here is nobody wakes up and says, I'm going to start an eating disorder today.
Yeah. It's a
9 times out of 10, it starts with good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Just let me change things up. And then it gets extreme, right? Because people start noticing like, oh, you've lost weight. You looked so great. Well, how did I look before I lost weight? Right? People are noticing me now more, but they didn't comment like that before. So it starts to mess with your mind. And that's why we have to, that talking is so important, right? And just helping anytime like our kids are saying, you know, if you do have a child that's overweight and they're in an unhealthy situation and they say, I really need to work on being more healthy, right? They're coming to you. Just be mindful as you start getting healthy, right? That you're having the correct conversations and you're monitoring it.
Yeah.
Because lots of times something, like I said, starts off well-meaning and really good. Because there are kids who get to a place where they're like, you know what? I don't feel good in my body. And that's them being in tune. And that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But we just have to help them walk through, what does healthy weight loss look like?
Well, and that goes back to taking care of a treasure. Your body is a temple, like managing and stewarding that well, I think are all really good conversations. I also just want to point out, you know, I mean, I'm guilty of this. I think of eating disorders, I think of girls.
Yeah.
And I think it's normal. I mean, most of the girls are suffering from eating disorders. But, you know, I'm raising a boy, teen boy. Yeah. He's an athlete. Yeah. And it's constantly more protein, more calories, more whatever. And again, I'm talking to him about, hey, you're able to eat 5,000 calories right now because you've got a lot like of energy that you're burning
and your metabolism
you're going.
Yeah.
But like you can't eat 5,000 calories when you're my age.
Yes.
And like I will say to him, if I ate 5,000 calories, I would be really overweight and not in good health.
Yeah.
Like not even so not worried about my body, not in good health. And so, you know, maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong, but I really take an open door approach to that because I don't want him to think this is his habit for the rest of his life. You can't eat 5,000 calories for the rest of your life. And it's not anything about his body. I feel like it's more like scientific, biological. I was gonna say,
to me, what pops into my head, that's just education. Of just understanding like when you're an athlete, this is what you need.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're not, it's going to look different. And so it doesn't sound like you're putting this huge emphasis on it, but it was definitely a conversation. So it's not this repeated thing like every day.
No.
Hey, just remember.
I think we talked about it once for 10 minutes.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Right. And so I think it's like when kids hear things like over and over, it's like, oh, like that's starting that narrow pathway.
That's the problem with the body shaming.
Right. But if it's more just an educational piece and it's just a good conversation, I think that is very healthy.
Yeah. And then we move on.
Right.
We move on and don't dwell on it.
Right.
Don't nag your kid about their weight. Don't, you know, of course, my daughter said something on one of the recent shows. She said, shame is not a good tactic for anything that you want to talk about. And, you know, that has stuck in my mind. And I think parents, sometimes we feel like we can shame our kids into something.
Absolutely.
Even I see that a lot with like non-disciplined kids.
Yes.
Or kids that are struggling in school. Well, you know, I'm just going to put the hammer down and they're not going to have this, this, and this until they get all A's. Well, like, I don't know if that's the approach. Maybe talk about why are you struggling?
Exactly.
Why do you think you're struggling in school? I mean, it could be like something that they're struggling with their eyes. They can't see something right. It could be an attention.
Completely.
I mean, it could be lots of different things.
Right. And I think that just goes back to being in tune, right?
Yeah.
Because the kids learn like, oh, you like me when I'm a red car. I'll pretend I'm a red car, right? That doesn't change anything about the car. You just put new paint on it. And so we
want to love you no matter what.
Right. Exactly. Like we'll work through it.
Yeah.
So I think it's being a safe person. I think because like this is a tale as old as time, right? Weight, relationships with bodies, right? We've seen it go so many different cycles and it really just comes down to relational, like moms and daughters, sons, moms, dads, sons, all of it. Like this is a normal part of life to have these conversations. Yeah. Food is such a huge part of our life.
Yeah.
We got to shop for it. We got to put it away. We got to cook it. We got to clean up from it. It's around so many things. So like, it should not be a taboo thing. We just just like we should have a healthy relationship with food, we should also have a healthy relationship having conversations around it.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask you one more thing. Tell me, as a counselor, you think, Mandy, you're right, you're not right, or, maybe I'm both. Maybe I'm both. So you got a kid going through puberty.
Yes.
And either they're going through at a high rate of speed, like faster than everybody else,
Yep.
or they're very delayed. And each kid's going to be different on that, even in your own family.
Yep.
And so if you see your kid, when I was walking through all that, it's not something that I would constantly point out or anything like that.
Yeah.
But if my kids started to talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, this person has this and I don't, or they have that and they're getting noticed and I don't. Again, those were the conversations then I would sweep in and be like, okay, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
Everybody's going through puberty.
Right.
And each person is different and they mature at different times.
Love that.
So just because you're not maturing right now, like all of these people, that doesn't mean anything is wrong with you.
Absolutely.
You have to trust God's timing on that.
Right. Exactly. And also how He's designed you.
Yes.
There are just going to be certain things we can't change. Like, your daughter's tall. My daughters are going to be tall. Like I'm 5'11", my husband's 6'8". Sorry, genetics. Like this is your reality, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a level of, you're right. Like they can't change their height, and how you get proportioned and how you go through puberty and where you put on weight and where you don't, right? There is a level of not comparing, but also just accepting. This is my journey with my body. Right. Accepting
yourself too.
Yes, exactly.
And honestly, Jamie, I think this also goes into like kids who struggle with their gender. There's an acceptance there of you may feel these qualities and you can have those qualities. Right. I mean, it's cool if you're a dude and you love baking or, pink or whatever, the stereotypical boxes that we put people in. But it's almost like this. We've gotten into the habit of not loving ourselves the way we are. Well, if we're big boned, if we're tall, if we're whatever color hair we have, we live in this like drive-through society where if I don't like my eyes, I change them. If I don't like my hair, I change them. If I don't like this, I'm going to change them.
You used that word earlier, shame, and I think that is such a powerful tool of the enemy, because anytime you look at addiction or change, what I always say is, let's just go with the eating disorder, right? That's an addiction, right? It's not the problem, it's the solution. And essentially is you feel shame, so you want to get as far away from yourself as possible. So how do we get far away as possible? I'm going to transform myself. I'm going to look different. I'm going to get drunk. I'm going to get high. It's anything that takes you away from your shame, right? And so an addiction or gender confusion, all that, right? Oftentimes it is not the problem, it's the solution.
To a deeper problem.
Yes.
Right? Like maybe unresolved trauma.
Yes.
Or I'm numbing myself from this. Or I just don't like who I am. And a narrative is going on in the brain that you are not enough. And I mean, that's what it is. You are not enough.
Absolutely. And we also just have to really look, even this could be a whole different podcast with like, just, going back to the eating disorders, but like, let's not overlook any level of trauma either, because trauma and eating disorders go hand in hand. And so that's a deeper question, right? And it could be the society we live in, right? Where thin is, what's the word I'm looking for? My brain.
Most accepted?
Yeah, or it's just kind of like, it's praised, I guess.
Praised.
Right?
Idolized.
Idolized. That's the word, right?
Yeah.
Right. So when we idolize stuff, right, sometimes it truly is. Like we want to become that because it's like, oh, that's idolized, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's rooted in something deeper. So we want to be really prayerful that we're not overlooking something, because sometimes it can be, or we want to go to something that's idolized, or sometimes it's we're working through a traumatic experience and it's manifesting through an eating disorder.
So good. So good. There's so much to unpack here.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would want to say on the topic of, I mean, I know we can go deeper into trauma and eating disorders, but on this show, like just this general show, body image or eating disorders, anything you want to throw out there to parents?
I really think just, we've covered an array of different things, right? Which I think is good, because I think there's a takeaway in here for everyone. And I think we've touched on a lot of things that kids are dealing with. And so my takeaway is just have conversations about it, just like we're doing right now. Right?
Healthy, non-shaming, non-judgmental.
Yes.
Don't call out your kid's weight,
right.
Obviously. But talk about their bodies.
Yeah, talk about their bodies and make sure that you're in a healed place too, though. So this may be prompting somebody to say, okay, what have I projected? What have I modeled? Or why do I feel uncomfortable listening to this? Or even if we're kind of like judgy or walling up, like, I don't agree with that, right? Sometimes it's because it's hitting a tender point with us or a non-healed point. So I would even just encourage listeners to really take a deep dive into their own relationship with their body and their history with food.
Look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Look in the mirror. And we spill that over to our kids, not realizing
completely.
And that's where it gets so toxic.
Yes.
So toxic. Yeah. And I think that was probably in the intent of the original host.
Right.
For sure. But I'm glad we were able to dive into it. I'm glad you came on the show because I just, from a licensed professional counselor and a girl mom, you're juggling all this too. Yeah. And I think that it was a really helpful insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm on the journey. I'm on it with y'all. Like, yes.
And I feel like every mom, I mean, I don't want to speak for dads, but I feel like every mom has a body journey.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've had babies. I'm in now, menopause, which is a whole other beast to manage on how my body is changing.
Right. And medical stuff.
Yeah.
And
But I'm even talking to my daughter. She's getting ready to be 21. I'm even talking to her about what I'm going through with menopause, just in the sense of not complaining or not, making fun of myself, but like, this is an ongoing journey of getting to know myself.
Absolutely.
And loving me no matter what.
Yeah. And I think you're just showing her vulnerability and you're showing her that like, this isn't a taboo subject, right? You're just normalizing it.
Our bodies are going to change over time and we need to talk about it.
Amen.
Okay. Thanks for being here, Jamie.
Thanks for having me. Mm-hmm.
nextTalk is a 501c3 nonprofit keeping kids safe online. To support our work, make a donation at nexttalk.org. nextTalk resources are not intended to replace the advice of a trained healthcare or legal professional, or to diagnose, treat, or otherwise render expert advice regarding any type of medical, psychological, legal, financial, or other problem. You are advised to consult a qualified expert for your personal treatment plan.
Our nextTalk podcast is in the top 2% of over 3.4 million podcasts ranked by Listen Notes. But now we're also adding YouTube. So this is a whole new thing we're doing. If you could like, subscribe, and comment on these videos, it would help us so much. We appreciate y'all.